And now, Vinny Perth, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, man. How are we?
Yeah, good. Before we get into the historic analysis, from your perspective, the dirty 3 points for Liverpool last night, how important is it when everything's been going against them that they put back-to-back results, not performances? I almost said performances, but not quite.
Yeah, I think it's important something to build on. The Champions League result during the week, I thought was just very, very good. Last night, as they say, that dirty performance, but at the same time, even at your very best last year, if you're Liverpool, I think you have games like that. So they're part and parcel of football, but I think it's important for psychologically to have a bit of time off now. I think it's nearly 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks, probably before they play again. So that will give them a time to sort of, albeit some players will go away on international duty, but it will give them a little bit of time to build towards that Champions League. I still think the Champions League is probably the best route of playing Champions League football again next year, if that makes sense, if they go and win it. But they're good enough to go on a run that's unbeaten between now and the end of the season if everything goes their way. So they can put pressure on and get back into the top four. But I think we've seen last night some signs of what's been wrong with them this year and how Klopp is trying to fix it. So it was a good result, albeit it wasn't a great performance. So they'll be a lot happier after the week's work that's gone in.
And we did want to go into what has been going wrong for Liverpool over the past few weeks. Vinny, you've done a bit of a deep dive for us this morning into the last 12 months, I think, for Liverpool. I think it's fair to say, from them being really good at the end of last season to them, I guess, falling away at the start of this calendar year. So you're going to take us back here to start to the Liverpool hammering of Palace at the end of last season, in June of last year. And I think you're just going to take us through here how Liverpool's pressing was so unbelievably good at this point and the personnel involved in it.
Yeah, I think what it's called is, and Klopp has used this word, so it's not something that's been labelled at him. I don't like some people being labelled certain coach, but he's used it and he's called it heavy metal football. And effectively, you can go around the house explaining that it's high intensity, it's in your face, he calls it brutal, and it's exciting. But effectively, it's real quick counter pressing, getting the ball back as quick as you can. And that's what his teams historically have been built on, Borussia Dortmund. And when you got Liverpool to the very best, I think one of the reasons I started looking into this was sort of as a coach, a work you're trying to learn, but also I haven't liked some of the comments that it's been one of the worst, Premiership teams or winning teams of history because of the points fall off has been massive. So we'll try to work out what was behind that. Obviously, injuries definitely plays a part in it, but some of it has been the tactical change by Klopp. And again, there's no doubt that's been forced by injuries, but it's been really fascinating to watch. That Crystal Palace game in particular, I think they won 5-6-0. They were outstanding. That was Liverpool at their very best. And then you watch them over the last few weeks and it's just chalk and cheese. So it was something I just felt was worth looking at and to see Stratton I can learn from it. And you most certainly do when you dive into it.
So on screen, we've got Mane, Firmino and Salah. I think this is what most people notice, first of all, when they look back at last season, Vinny, just how good that front three is without the ball.
Yeah, so I suppose all the plaudits for pressing, it starts with that front three. And the world class at it. That's where it all starts from. Remember Sky doing a big piece last year and on Mane, I think, closing down one of the goalkeepers, and they scored a result of it. But that only works unless the team and again Klopp has spoken about, he's big into the whole team has to press as a unit, and that front three are brilliant at it. But what is starting to happen is, and we'd see it as we go on later on, is that they've lost the will to do it a little bit because what's behind them. There's no doubt their own form has dipped off with the players, but as a result, they're letting teams out too easily now. But last year, that was phenomenal. But what was behind it was even better, but just ironically didn't get the plaudits for it because we always talk about strikers first and foremost.
So behind it, obviously, was your first choice midfield of Wijnaldum, Fabinho and Henderson.
Yeah, absolutely. And when everybody is fit last year, generally they had the odd niggle last season, but by and large it was that three in all of the big games. Fabinho would sit as a number 6 And what I'm showing here is you can clearly see the front three are ready to press, but actually the one that's ready to go first is Wijnaldum. But what's interesting is Fabinho is in also, so we call it in football the number 6 or the defensive midfielder. He's ready to press as well, and then Henderson is coming in after it. And they really choked the life out of teams. In this game against Palace ended up forcing just kicking it long. Van Dijk and Gomez, who were quite quick, picked up everything. And Liverpool went again and again. And ultimately that affects the Palace team or any team you play against Liverpool, because mentally you're worn out. You're giving the ball back to Liverpool and they go again, and it's attack after attack and wave after wave. So that three behind them was instrumental in how they play. The energy levels they have last season was just phenomenal. And again, it wasn't just from a defensive point of view. They turn up in different positions. We remember the great goal when Wijnaldum got the header against Barcelona that got them back into that tie. So they gave them everything. And again, to explain heavy metal or counter-press football, if you look at the three here, when they win the ball back, and Pep spoke about it this week in terms of sometimes he slows his team down from a counter-press. And the reason for that is when you win a ball back off the opposition and your team flood forward, you're actually vulnerable to them winning it back off you and you conceding. And he spoke about it this week. But in that instance there, that midfield three, just like dogs of war, all of these old football sayings, the intensity they win that ball back. As you see, it's Firmino, but it just comes from the three of them getting after it. It breaks the Salah, and Crystal Palace are on the back foot. And then it's a lot easier for the likes of Salah, Mane, Firmino or Jota at the moment to break down a team like that who think their fullbacks think we're getting out, and then it turns over and Liverpool go and score. And they've lost that intensity this year, as we'll get onto, but that was really crucial to how Liverpool played last year and became one of the best teams in the Premiership of all time as a result of it.
Crucial to that as well, Vinny, just to wrap up on the positives, I guess, from that era almost of Liverpool, is the high back line. And I think an image here is from a Manchester City game.
Yeah, so you're talking about one of the, Manchester-Liverpool last season, one of the biggest games in the world. And for all of that to work is you have to have a really high line. And again, there was certain criticism of that, particularly on free kicks. But it won't work because, especially now in the Premiership, you're talking about teams, even Brighton, third, fourth from the bottom, or Southampton, they just bounce ball back around your team. They've got players good enough, even the modern-day goalkeeper. But in this example, they're playing against Man City. There's probably 20 yards of a distance there. A lot of space for City to go in behind. But they're just about, as a midfield, to press the ball. And when Van Dijk and Gomez are in the team, they squeeze that pitch up and basically squeeze the life out of the opposition. And again, that's all designed about winning the ball back. Again, Klopp speaks about, if I had 80% possession, people say, oh, that's great, but I think I should have more. And effectively what he's saying is, I want the ball all of the time. And he drills that into his players. Obviously, fitness levels is huge, but in this clip, you can see it's very, very brave of the team. Again, in one of the biggest games in world football, Liverpool against Man City. So that's where it comes from. That's his philosophy, and that's what probably one of the greatest teams of all time, the Premiership, was built on last season.
Let's move on to this season then, Vinny. And the next image we're going to bring up here, I guess, illustrates the personnel differences in Liverpool's midfield. Why has that made such a big difference?
Well, look, obviously the injuries first and foremost are huge. We all know that in terms of the centre halves in Van Dijk. But when Van Dijk first went out, Liverpool didn't all of a sudden fall off a cliff. It came gradually. Obviously then Matip went out and Gomez as a result. But bringing Curtis Jones and Thiago into the team, that 2 eights, we call them eights or attacking midfielders of Henderson and Wijnaldum, the energy levels they gave Liverpool was crucial. And turning up in different areas, as I said, Henderson's crosses in games, first-time crosses, was like Kevin De Bruyne's and would do a City, for argument's sake. But this year, you've got that five of Wijnaldum has had to become the sitter. Klopp did try Thiago there and it didn't work. You've got Henderson and Fabinho most likely playing centre-half throughout most of the season. And the knock-on effect is just huge. It's like, you can carry, as we seen at times last night, Thiago alongside Wijnaldum and Fabinho, or Curtis Jones, who's a young player, a really exciting player, but he's inconsistent. Sometimes he's best player on the pitch, sometimes Klopp takes him off early, but they don't have that heavy metal football, that intensity, that running power that the other two guys have in terms of Henderson, Fabinho, Wijnaldum. That is a three. And as I said, I thought that signing Thiago to start the season was really good. But I seen, and the reason it was really good is at certain times you need a player that's going to unlock the door against certain opposition. And Liverpool probably lacked that. That would be the one criticism of last season's team. And it was Klopp evolving, bringing in a passer. But the knock-on effect with the injuries behind him, and it's if you can say a midfield three, they all are 33.3% of your midfield makeup. When you take 66% of that out of it, the fall off for Liverpool has been colossal.
Naturally, and then obviously the knock-on impact on some of your attackers when it comes to Firmino and his press, when it comes to Salah and his positioning, has been stark as well. And I know we've got a graphic here of how they set up when the opposition are in possession. As you can see on screen there, the opponents are the yellow dots there on screen, Vinny. And I think Firmino here is a player you wanted to focus on.
Yeah, so Firmino, we speak about his link-up play, and he drops in at times to get the ball, but that's in an attacking sense. But from a press sense, he because of Henderson and Wijnaldum last season being that advance, as I showed earlier on, and even Fabinho at times, he was the one that started the press for Liverpool and forced the opposition into either going long or making an error. What he's had to do at times this season, because of the two behind him in, say, Jones or Thiago, is he's had to go into that deep line number 6, belong to the opposition. So it's meant that there's a lot more work for Mane and Salah to press, who are both equally as good as Firmino or aren't far off it. And when the three of them press together, it's massive. And they're not, again, as I said, the knock-on effect for that is strikers, no matter who they are, don't want to be running for too long. They want the ball. They want to be scoring goals, getting in on goal. And I think their patience is weighed thin a little bit throughout the season, and it's dipped the amount of running they're doing. And statistically, that's backed up as well. So it's really affected the team. And if Firmino doesn't go in after that number 6, we've seen teams, Southampton game's a prime example where they just completely outpassed Liverpool's midfield. Everton done it at times in the last couple of weeks, and the loss of that counter press from Liverpool has effectively changed everything about their team and why they struggle so much.
We can see next up as well that game against Everton that you allude to. How big a factor in that Everton victory was Firmino, and I guess maybe getting stuck between a rock and a hard place without the ball?
Yeah, and I think, look, it's a Merseyside derby. So if you imagine what Klopp would want, he would want his team right at him, making loads of tackles, all of that stuff, pressing the life out of Everton. They have a great record. And listen, there's no doubt the early goal changed the game for Everton. But at the same time, you see in this clip here, Firmino is running after the deep line midfielder for Everton. And the stark difference between that and Crystal Palace, or the way they played last season, is Thiago and Jones are more or less out of the screen. And as I said, the knock-on effect for that is huge for Mane and Salah. They're running after fullbacks because effectively they let Everton out too easy. And that's huge. And you see Mane is a full pelt there running back towards his goal. That has to happen at different stages, but that was happening too much throughout the season. And you just become, it was so easy for Everton to pick out a pass or go back through their goalkeeper and just have easy possession. And that is not what made Liverpool the greatest team, or one of the greatest teams last season, and it was huge. And I think I moved on. The next clip after that shows a prime example where Fabinho goes and takes a chance and closes the goalkeeper or the centre half down, and the support behind him is just really, really poor because Everton are it's so easy for Everton just to get out with one simple pass. And I think that's been replicated throughout the season at different stages or over the last couple of months. If you look at Everton's deep line midfielder there, he's just got the freedom of the park. There's no way with Wijnaldum, Henderson, Fabinho and the team that would happen. I would say on a video analysis session by Klopp, that would drive him demented. It would drive him mad. But that is, I mean, that's a massive a change of how they play or people in the team. It's easy to say, well, make the other lads run more, but it's not a natural game. Curtis Jones has got energy. He can press. Thiago can press, but he certainly hasn't got the same running power that the other two would have, and it's been huge. And I think
that's really interesting
as well. As a result, when you look at the statistics of the amount of times Liverpool pressed the ball between last season and this season, the fall off has been dramatic.
Just on that, the type of midfielder that you mentioned there that is letting them down somewhat, it seems incredible that Jurgen Klopp would actually go out and sign someone like Thiago if he was aware that his running power simply isn't as good as his previous three midfielders. If, as you illustrate here, it's that important to how Liverpool play. Yeah,
well, I suppose the answer to that is yes and no. It looks like a bad signing. That's what you're judged on as a manager. It looks like a bad signing. I remember signing a player, and I've got criticised him even to this day over it, but he got injured after 4 weeks and played 15 games for me, and it looks like a bad signing. But the intention of signing Thiago for Liverpool was, you've got to involve your squad. You've got to make them better. You've got to do different things. I think one of the first couple of games from Liverpool, everything was going well. People were raving about Thiago. His passing range is phenomenal. He's able to pick out the passing between lines. He's someone in a top game where, or even a game where a team, Sheffield United or Crystal Palace were sitting in, he's someone who could have came off the bench and changed the game for them. That brilliant passing range he has. So it was the right thing to do. It was the right, add another element into the squad. The problem has been, as I said to you, he's took 66% of his midfield out of the game by putting them back as centre-half generally throughout the season. And Jesus, the thoughts of me, Vinny Perth, criticising Jurgen Klopp, I think that was a massive mistake. I think when we see people like Nat Phillips, we done on off the ball, we done the West Ham game, and albeit he was marking Antonio, who's suits a centre half like that, he's probably the best player on the pitch, and he didn't play for 4 or 5 weeks after that. And that it makes no sense to me. I'm struggling with that. And then he's come in when Henderson got injured, and they've kept a couple of clean sheets. I don't think he's the easiest on the eye. He looks more like Jamie Carragher than Van Dijk, but at the same time, a natural defender, and what they've lost out midfield. And he's admitted to the mistake effectively by what he said about Fabinho over the last sort of 7-8 days. It's been a massive loss. He called him the lighthouse. Not sure what that means, but I presume it's someone that puts is a security guard or whatever the right. I'm not sure that translated right, but that's what he called him. So he's admitted to the error himself. Just confused why it took so long. We don't know what goes on behind scenes in training, whether Phillips, he's tried Nico Williams there and different people, and it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, for sure. There's just one last image we want to skip on to, Vinny, because we're a little bit tight for time. But you've done an interesting breakdown as well of, you mentioned Nico Williams there, of the right side of Liverpool's pitch, of Trent Alexander-Arnold and the impact that's having on Mo Salah.
Yeah, I think this is huge. I mean, when Henderson played last season, we could find clips of him crossing the ball, getting to the end line, or just supporting the play where Trent Alexander got to the end line, pulled back to Henderson, that first time cross, or that three of 66 being Trent, and the way Salah is able to play in the half position between the centre half and the fullback. The knock-on effect for that is the opposition have to move over and cover him. Either the fullback goes in and that gives freedom for Trent to go down the line, or the fullback goes with Trent, centre half comes across, and now there's more space inside for Mane and Firmino. And Henderson gave them that. The difference, particularly in the last couple of weeks, is when Liverpool build up, they like to build up in a three at the back. Last season it was Fabinho, number 3 there. This year, or of late, he's got Trent a little bit deeper, and his starting position is deeper. Even in last night's game, he gets forward and he breaks forward, but he doesn't start anywhere near as high as he was last season. The difference is someone like Thiago's picking up the ball in that position. All of a sudden, the opposition back four, grand, the fullback looks after Salah, grand, the two centre-halves are in the normal position, and there isn't the same threat there, and it's really, really affected Salah, Mane and Fabinho. And like, you can't give those a free pass at times because they've missed some glorious chances, even last night. I mean, Mane's got to score a couple of times, but the setup of the team is really affecting that front three in huge amount. That I actually have huge sympathy, because I think on paper, and Jota it looks like the player we think he is. On paper, they're as good as any front three in the world, and I think the setup of the team is really affecting them. And then again, that's the challenge with Thiago in your team, and it's why he's come in for some criticism.
So, Vinny, if you can identify this, no doubt Klopp has, and even the point you're making about Fabinho, does that give you more confidence that the final 8-9 weeks of the season will actually see them getting back to a level where that energy comes back into midfield? Henderson's back after the international break, so Henderson and Fabinho suddenly are driving that front three on. Like, it's a very simple fix, as opposed to it being a massive, complicated, they've got to wait for Van Dijk to get back, they've got to bring the confidence back in the team. Some fairly easy changes will happen automatically by the change of personnel in midfield. His first choice three in midfield will be back for the last 9 games. If I guaranteed that right now, would you feel confident that they're playing Champions League football next season, either through winning it or finishing in the top 4?
I don't know whether I'm confident to get into the top 4, and then winning a knockout competition can go either way. So there's difficulties with that. There's no doubt he's seen this, and they've got better facilities and better people doing this work than I have. There's obviously a problem with, say, Nat Phillips, and I don't understand it, but we don't see training. As I said, he looks more like Carragher is a good example I use. I think if they get the best players on the pitch, I think Henderson, they can afford to play Thiago in that midfield with Wijnaldum and Fabinho, for argument's sake. Henderson and Matip are centre-half. Then they'll go very close Champions League-wise if Matip and Henderson were to get back fit, and 2 of them were playing centre-half. Or if he was brave and went with Kabak or Phillips and Matip and played his first-choice midfield, I think there's no doubt they've a real chance of winning the Champions League. The problem they have is they've given up that much ground to Leicester, and now Chelsea look like they're firing on all cylinders. Getting back into Champions League football is, unfortunately for Liverpool, is not guaranteed. And I think ultimately you've got to have huge sympathy for that team, because yes, I think the manager should have spotted it a little bit earlier, but the injuries has crucified them and left them short. So I couldn't guarantee them, or I couldn't look at that team and say I expect them to be in Champions League football next year. Absolutely no way. They've just got too much of a mountain to climb, but I hope they do. I think, because I think they can get back to their very best.
Yeah, Vinny, good stuff. That was brilliant. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers.